Hello everyone. Welcome to Wayne Lumpkins and his railroad adventures. We hope you enjoyed our last video and we hope you enjoy this one. We have a lot of videos to do, so let's see what happens on this one. I'm going to talk about when I first hired out on the railroad. By the way, there's not many people like me, alive or dead, because I worked on so many different railroads, which we will get into as we talk about different adventures. But in the beginning, back then you went to a freight office. They had a personnel director, and I went there, put an application in with a man named Mr. Chamberlain. 30 days later, he calls me in for an interview. And then he says, "How would you like to be a brakeman?" And I said, "I'd love it. What is it?" And he explained it to me. Because back then, on the train crew, there was 4 to 5 people. If you had 4-man crew, you had an engineer and a head brakeman. You had a conductor and a flagman who were on the caboose. Because when I hired out, we had cabooses on every train. They didn't have a fireman then, but they had a reserve engineer, so sometimes you'd have a 5-man crew. Anyway, they hired me and I reported to the Birmingham division. And you went to work, you trained, but it was called cubbing. Cubbing was the term the railroad used, like you're a little cub bear and you're learning. So anyway, you had to ride every assignment, every job, and most of the old conductors didn't want you in their way, so they'd tell you go get on the engine and stay there. But anyway, you did that, and you did it real fast because your seniority was established when you finished your cubbing. I started to say training, but cubbing, and you marked up on an extra board. So we were all in a hurry so we could mark up and get good seniority. So anyway, we wrote all these different assignments, and then we marked up. Now, you'd get called out on a train. We had 2 divisions. We had the LD, which was Louisville, Nashville, which was CTC, that's Signal Traffic, Centralized Traffic Control. And then we had the ND, which was train order, not block or nothing, actual train order. A dispatcher in Birmingham would put these orders out to all the different operators, which back then we had operators everywhere. They would all copy the same thing and then hand them up to the different trains. And those orders told you what you were going to do, who you were going to meet, where you were going to meet, how you were going to meet him, all kinds of things, even wait at so-and-so till such a time. Not only did you have the train orders, but we had scheduled trains. We had lots of mine-run switchers, and what a mine-run switcher is, back in those days, we had a lot of mines we mined dirt, to put it blunt, but it was called muck. So during the night, we would put the local empties in and take the loads out, and they would go to Stauffer Chemical or Monsanto, and they would get phosphorus out of it. And actually, they used the byproduct to put down as slag. It was called slag, not ballast. So you would, if your train stopped, the reason the guy called a flagman, if you stopped, as I said, it was dark, nobody knew where you were at, he would have to take a couple of fusees, a couple of torpedoes, and go back and put the torpedoes down 50 feet apart, and then walk half a distance between the torpedoes and your train. And then the train coming up behind you would hit the torpedoes, and he would start slowing down, and then you had the red fusee or flag if it was in the daylight, and you would stop him so he wouldn't run over you. That's why they were actually called flagmen. I don't think they call flagmen nowadays, but that was part of the railroad back then. And you would even pick your orders up. I know a lot of you seen that little V stick that you would reach out and grab. That was a lot of fun to do that. And you would always have to line your own switches, except on the LD, the CTC, the dispatcher would line you in. So anyway, I worked as a brakeman for 2 years. Then I got promoted to conductor for 3 more years, which gave me 5 years, and I could interview now for engineer, which I did and I got. And then I started my training. We didn't do a lot of book work then like they do now. They put you with an engineer and you learned to run trains, because back then in Tennessee and Alabama you had mountains. I mean, actual Sand Mountain, Ardmore Hill, Mount Eagle going to Chattanooga. So it was a lot to learn, and the braking was nothing like it is today. In fact, the shoes were iron, cast iron. So it was a very difficult time, and you had to really work your butt off to learn this stuff. And on Fridays, we'd go to classrooms. So you did that. They called us 90-day wonders because the old heads didn't believe we could be an engineer in 90 days, but we could, and we did. But you do that for 90 days, and then you would mark up as an engineer. I was actually promoted, got my certificate, December of 1978. Now, that brings us up to me becoming an engineer. There's so many other things we're going to talk about involving being an engineer, the brakeman, the flagman, conductors. But we're going to end today on that note, and then next episode, we'll talk about the different runs. We'll even get into where the different railroads. As I said earlier, I will hit on this a little bit. I have worked on the L&N, which is Louisville, Nashville, Seaboard Coastline, CSX, and then I left and went up on the East Coast, which is all another story, and worked for Conrail. Then I left there and went out west and worked for CP all the way to Kansas City, Missouri. I probably have more miles than anyone alive or dead running trains. And I know I've worked on more railroads than anybody I know. Actually, they call me a boomer, and a boomer was what Casey Jones was. You just worked on different railroads. At the time, I was having a big time working all over the country. It was fun. Had to learn a lot, but it was fun. Which that's something else we will talk about, the way Conrail trained, the way CP trained, and CSX. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Join us again in 2 weeks for the next video. Goodbye.